So there was some sad news announced yesterday. I'd known a little while, but I kept quiet. It wasn't for me to say. Um, Obviously, I think the family put some out. I was sent a screenshot yesterday. So a gentleman who I interviewed for my very first book, 2000 and, so that come out 2017, so it must have been 2016. Um, Absolute gentleman by the name of Terry Mitchell. I interviewed nine years ago now. And basically, when I first started writing books on that guy there, Paul Sykes, the name Terry Mitchell kept coming up on the forums. And obviously, I kind of looked into it. I think I tracked him down by his son, Terry Jr., Tez. And I interviewed him, Caff Enzo, I think it was. It was on Kirkstall Road in Leeds. I didn't know what to expect. And when I met him, I've met a lot of characters last couple of years. You can sense an aura. Like, for instance, when you meet Nigel Benn, when I met Mike Tyson, John O'Gardner had it. When you kind of stood next to him, and you can almost tell that they're still like iron. And Terry was like that. I met him, I interviewed him 2016, and then I gave him a copy of that book 2017. So he was, obviously, I extensively, some would say obsessively, researched that man's life. And obviously that guy took a lot of kickings in his life. But the only one, to my knowledge, and I've literally spoken to hundreds of people now, the only one who ever really beat a prime Paul Sykes was Terry Mitchell. All the rest were taking liberties with an old man, punching an old man drunk. And so I interviewed Terry, very modest, very humble man. I interviewed so I spoke to one guy, a well-known boxer, I won't name, and he said, you need to speak to Terry Mitchell because he was, I'll never forget the words, Leeds numero uno. He was the Mr. Number One. So when I met Terry, as I said, you could tell he was just, I think he was 73 when he passed, so he must have been mid-60s when I met him. And in fact, I don't think he was, well, I know he wasn't any kind of boxer. In actual fact, he was an athlete. He was a rugby player. And you could tell, as I said, when I met him last nearly 10 years ago, you could just see he had that, like, he would have been the last person you would have wanted to roll on the floor with. And he very sadly passed in the last week. Lovely man. I always wanted to get back in touch and interview him. For Cam, I don't know. I'm not sure whether he would have even done it. He's a very humble man, very very friendly, very polite. When I met him in that Caff Enzo place, as I said, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't even know what he looked like. But as soon as I saw him, as soon as I saw a man come in, and everyone was kind of like want to stand up and shake his hand and say hello to him. Obviously, I knew it was him before I knew it was him. And he's, I got a couple of messages last couple of days, and I wasn't sure whether they were even true or not. But sadly, it is. I read something yesterday, and yeah, really, really sad. I know a lot of people who knew him on a personal level and haven't got a bad word to say about him. Yeah, not a bully, not even really a fighting type. He was a guy who stood up to the bullies like he did with Paul Sykes. In fact, about a year after I interviewed Terry, I didn't even put this in the book. I met a man in Leeds, and he was there in 1979. So it was November 1979. Lenny McLean says in his book something like, "We were going to have a fight." Basically, this was, it was all scheduled. Alex Steen, Joe Powell, they put it on Finsbury Park, 1979. Lenny McLean against Paul Sykes. And in Lenny's book, he says something like, "Oh, Sykesy was done at a big ruck with 4 doormen. He beat them all, but he sustained a cut." That's not technically true. The cut bit is, but it wasn't the 4 doormen. It was Terry Mitchell. And I didn't interview him. I met a guy about a year after, and he told me he watched it all. And he said, basically, one thing Terry did tell me, he said, so the year before in 1978, he went and watched Paul box at, forgot the place, it's knocked down now, Wakefield. The name escapes me. But basically, it was when he beaten the American and put him in hospital. And he said, I knew watching him, he said that, arms 10 foot long. And this old man, he's about 90 then. He's probably no longer here now. But he told me in detail exactly what happened. And he said, Terry just absolutely annihilated him, and never ever wanted another go. And yeah, massive. As I said, I've spoke to couple of Leeds people last couple of day or two, and they've got massive. One guy said to me, "It'll be a massive void in our city." As I said, I meet all kinds of different people doing what I'm doing, famous, infamous, notorious, um, all different kinds, and I've met not very pleasant people, but I've never met anyone who has a bad word for Terry Mitchell. So thoughts and condolences with the Mitchell family, and yeah, it would have been nice to have sat down with him and interviewed him for the camera rather than the book. But yeah, big miss, and yeah, the only guy who really flattened a prime Paul Sykes. Um, yeah, never got his opinion what he thought of the book. I remember he did tell me. He said when he beat Sykes, he said years later I seen him and he was in the park drinking wine, cider with some woman or something, and it was just like looking at a different person. It was just like, but back then it was 1979, so that was Terry was a bit younger. I think he was about 6 years younger than Paul, so Paul would have been 33. Terry would have been 27. So that was, and people were like, oh, well, Sykes was drunk. Or Terry had a right skinful, and they, basically Terry pummeled him, and they basically made friends and sat drinking. And it was in a place called the Market Tavern, which is nicknamed Madhouse. I think no longer there now. And he said I was on my guard, thinking, is he going to sly shot me? Because that's what he was known for, and he never ever did. But yeah, really sad, and I was really deeply saddened to hear the news that Terry Mitchell, Leeds, really, really very well liked guy, absolute gentleman. As I said, met him a couple of times, and he was nothing but extremely polite to me. So yeah, really, really sad news that Terry Mitchell has sadly passed.